If you think about it, most lawsuits ultimately culminate or end in a contract. So I show you how my business issues worksheet analysis works in formulating the best deal possible when negotiating and drafting any type of business deal, including lawsuits that end in a settlement agreement of any kind, including criminal and civil cases. So in prior episodes of this podcast, when I talk to you about something that I call a side piece or side chick settlement agreement, I talked to you about why you should use my business issues worksheet analysis in all stages of your civil and criminal litigation plans. Now, keep in mind, this process is not just good for criminal and civil cases, but this is the type of process or analysis that you want to learn how to execute for any type of business deal, agreement, or contract. Now, before we go any further, one of the most important things to remember about a side piece or side chick settlement agreement is you don't want to wait until you need one to find out what it is. And so examples of side piece or side chick settlement agreements are agreements like the Donald Trump, Stormy Daniels, hush money, non-disclosure agreement, or also called an NDA, or the Bill Cosby, Andrea Constad civil settlement and confidentiality agreement that was instrumental in the civil side of their case that resulted ultimately in the criminal case against Bill Cosby that resulted in his conviction and imprisonment. Another important thing to remember is that you cannot solve a problem until you know what the problem is. And so you'll never be able to solve a problem if you don't even know that a problem exists. But if you use my 5-7-10 contract analysis that is also incorporated into my business issues worksheet analysis, even if you're blindsided by a side piece settlement agreement scenario, because let's keep it 100. Our clients never tell us the 100% truth about all of their calamities. And so if you institute and learn how to use this analysis procedure, you'll still be able to remain focused on the client's major business goals and not make a fatal error in the litigation stage of your case. When I say 5-7-10, 5 refers to 5 business issues or problems, 7 contract concepts or what I call problem solvers, and these are your contract principles that are used throughout the contract. So these are where these contract concepts come from, like your covenants or obligations and declarations throughout the contract. So these are your contract concepts or problem solvers, and then 10 contract sections that I have standardized for you, which are the 10 basic contract sections that should be used in any good contract or agreement. Now, some of us think that we can just blindly work a case without mapping things out in writing. And so this is what I mean when I say that you cannot solve a problem until you know what the problem is. In my mind, the only way to determine what all of the problems are is to sit down when that case first comes into your office, and then you want to periodically throughout the case update this analysis and take each one of the client's major business goals and determine if one of 5 business issues are present. And so now I want to just jump right in and show you what I mean when I'm actually using my business issues worksheet. And I'm going to be using that Bill Cosby, Andrea Constad case as an example. And so the first thing I do is I like to list the client goal on the worksheet. And when you start to look at the client goals, and sometimes the client will come in and they'll tell you what their major goals are. But when you start to map out those goals, you want to put them in order of importance, or the one that is most critical. So that is going to be my business goal number one. And then I work my way down in the level of importance. So I'm using this as an example. Goal number one, that Cosby needs to obtain an immunity court order signed by the judge, which will be facilitated by a motion filed by the DA in the case. And in addition, it will also be supported by some type of an obligation from Constad to cooperate with that procedure. And so globally, we can all see that one of the main goals of this Bill Cosby side piece settlement agreement is the hush money confidentiality component of the deal. Okay, so somewhere along the way, Cosby's team lost sight of who needed to hush. Cosby's main goal was not only to make sure that Andrea Constad hushed, but it was of critical importance for Cosby to hush and not waive his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, thinking that anything he said in a civil proceeding or deposition would remain confidential. But what we see ever so more vividly in hindsight is that equally as of critical importance was making sure that Bill Cosby also remained silent while also obtaining the immunity order. In other words, Bill Cosby had to act like he might testify in that civil deposition while obtaining the critically important immunity order without ever actually testifying in the deposition. So keeping all of these moving parts together requires mapping these things out in writing. He needs to maintain the idea or the critical importance of the idea that he would never utter a word about these events. Now, the initial DA in the case didn't believe he had enough evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And now that comes to another one of Bill Cosby's major business goals, which would have been to obtain something in writing, some type of writing from the DA that would be binding on future DAs, because DAs don't serve in office forever. But that's another one of the business goals that would be mapped out on the business issues worksheet. But if we just stay with this particular goal that we're working with right now, we can see that the parties orally agree with the input of the DA to settle the case in civil litigation. So the idea was that the DA would not bring charges against Bill Cosby if he promised to settle the case in civil litigation with Andrea Constad. And that was the deal at the time. And actual consideration was paid out on that deal to Andrea Constad, which she has enjoyed and has never had to return till this day. But somehow the parties lost sight of the possible potential to leverage the DA's criminal immunity capability against the monetary consideration for the civil case hush money confidentiality agreement portion of the parties' deal. They lost sight of it because they did not use the client's business goals to determine one or more of the 5 business issues, so they could use one or more of 7 contract concepts or problem solvers to solve each one of those issues or problems. And so as you can see here, we have our goal or example business issues worksheet here. And so goal number 1 would be that Cosby needs to obtain that immunity order signed by the judge, facilitated by a motion or some type of application filed by the DA Castor at that time, in addition to Constad's obligation or promise to cooperate and participate in this procedure. So when I look at my 5 business issues, which are money, risk, control, standards issues, and endgame issues. So when you have money issues, I will map out any type of money issue that will result from this goal, even the money issues regarding the attorney's fees to draft or prepare the documents needed to give to the DA so that he can submit them to the judge, because we're probably gonna want to have some type of input on the drafting of these particular documents. And then any money issue regarding any amount of money or the consideration used to leverage or secure Andrea Constad's agreement to cooperate. And so in conjunction with me putting the 5 business issues here on my business issues worksheet, I also put the corresponding contract concept or problem solver that will be used in the agreement to solve this problem or business issue. And so here in this particular respect, whenever we're talking about money, and I show you this in further detail when I go over my full course on this business issues worksheet analysis, but whenever we're talking about money in the contract, we usually are dealing with some type of a covenant or a covenant declaration combo. And these items are placed in the payment provision, which is located in section 3 of the 10 contract sections. And so this goes in section 3, which is the business actions section of the contract. And so whenever we list this payment provision, which is a very critical provision in the agreement, the critical obligation in the agreement, is we want to answer some questions. And so I have a little note down here, pay WWHW, which means pay what, to who, how, and when. And so these are just some of the things that I teach you, some of the techniques that I teach you about contract drafting in my course. And so then here I show you the risk. So we have a risk issue regarding Cosby testifying, because if he testifies or discloses events regarding the alleged incident, these items that are in red, these will be declarations or definitions that will be included in the agreement. So as I'm going along, I'm realizing that there are some things that will need to be defined in the agreement, and these are called declarations. And so if he discloses events regarding the alleged incident in the civil deposition or trial without the immunity order, then he'll waive his right against self-incrimination, and this will expose him to a high risk of future criminal prosecution that could result in imprisonment, which is exactly what happened. Okay, but this is your high dollar. This is the thing, when you do that cost benefit analysis, this is the thing that you absolutely do not want to ever happen. So you want to shore up this risk. And so whenever there is a money issue, there's going to be risk. And whenever there is risk, you have to control that risk. And so we're going to control that risk with a covenant obligating Constad to submit an immunity declaration and any other cooperation that she would need to provide in making sure that this procedure is executed by the DA. And so that would be a covenant. The problem solver or contract concept used would be a covenant. We use covenants to provide the promises or obligations that the parties will carry out in the agreement. And then we have our standards issues, because it seems that the parties lost sight or were not aware of the laws or the rules that surrounded any type of criminal immunity order, if any, in this particular jurisdiction. Somehow the parties thought that the DA's oral promise not to prosecute included some type of immunity which it did not. And so this is something that would definitely need to be mapped out on that business issues worksheet so that the parties are aware of all of the laws and rules surrounding this procedure, and if there are any laws or rules that would provide for this type of procedure. And then lastly, I talked to you about endgame issues, which are going to be those issues that are going to be implicated in the terminations, in the indemnities and remedies portions or provisions in the agreement. And so I talk to you, or I teach you about 3 types of termination events: your friendly, your unfriendly, and your neutral. And so in conjunction with those termination events are your remedies and indemnities that would be the consequences for a party's failure to carry out any one of their obligations in the agreement. This is going to provide more leverage and even some type of monetary or any type of consequence that would deter a party from thinking about not following through on their obligations in the agreement. Well, if you've enjoyed these tips, I ask that you please follow me on Instagram, and please also subscribe to my YouTube channel. And please click the bell so you won't miss any of my tips. And if you'd like to learn more about my 5, 7, 10 contract analysis, which also incorporates my business issues worksheet analysis, please visit me on my website at professorblackmore.com.